From a water conservationist to a bomb blast survivor, inspirational women take over Narendra Modi's social media for International Women's Day. Was it a celebration of their achievements or just a publicity stunt? I'm Imran Gata, and today's newsmakers are India's women. They were 7 women who'd achieved great things in their lives, and for International Women's Day, Narendra Modi gave them access to his millions of social media followers. The aim, according to the Prime Minister, was to inspire India's women. But his critics say it was nothing more than a gimmick, and some went as far as to call it hypocritical. The ruling BJP claims they've done plenty to improve the lives of women, from tougher punishments for rape crimes to equal roles within the military. But since Modi came to power, sexual violence has risen dramatically and the number of women in the workforce has plummeted. So has the Prime Minister really been as good for women as he claims? That debate shortly, but first, Natalie Perhernan has this report.
She inspires us. That's the hashtag India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi wanted trending to mark International Women's Day. His social media accounts with millions of followers were handed over to 7 women to share their message. They included a bomb blast survivor, a woman who runs a food bank, and a water conservation activist. Critics have argued he's merely paying lip service to female citizens, and that what's really needed is action offline. For many of these women, the road to gender equality starts with safety.
We want to create awareness among the people about the problems that women are facing today, and we want to create a safe environment in which women can live safely.
The Modi administration has launched programs aimed at improving women's lives, such as providing greater access to sanitation. But his government has come under fire for its slow approach to addressing sexual violence. Federal data suggests a woman in India is raped on average every 15 minutes. A series of rape cases in recent years highlights the dangers women face from gender-based violence. And a 2018 Thomson Reuters Foundation poll of gender experts ranked it as the world's most dangerous country for women. Findings that India's National Commission for Women rejected. Modi says he's determined to empower women. He's done that for the people involved in his social media campaign. Ensuring the rights of all Indian women are upheld will take much more commitment. Natalie Perhernan, The Newsmakers.
Let's go to New Delhi now, where I'm joined by Shaina NC. She's the national spokeswoman for India's ruling BJP. MM Vetticad is a journalist and calls herself the world's most committed feminist. And Mihira Sood is an advocate in the Indian Supreme Court specializing in women's rights. Good to have you all on the Newsmakers. Anna, let me start with you. Were you encouraged by the campaign at all? Would you give credit to it?
I'm afraid not. You know, I know that the popular thing among liberals is to say, come on, let's look at both sides. He's doing something after all. But this handing over of Modi's social media accounts to women is tokenism from a prime minister who has in fact actively encouraged the abuse of women on the social media. And he's reputed for following people who are known only for trolling, abusing, threatening women on the social media. And Mr. Modi is great at PR campaigns. A few years ago, he started something called the Selfie with Daughter campaign. And ironically, a women's rights activist called Kavita Krishnan and a prominent Bombay-based entertainer called Shruti Seth criticized this Selfie with Daughter campaign and received a flood of abuse for doing so from Modi's followers, and Modi did nothing to apologize to them or to stop his followers from doing so. So I'm afraid the reality on the ground is very different from the tokenism that Mr. Modi indulges in for the world to see.
Shaina, tokenism. Tell me why you disagree.
I don't just disagree, the people of this country disagree. Let's understand that Selfie with Beti was a campaign which we all participated in, and I think that it was a great success. The Prime Minister talks about Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, not just as a campaign, but whether it's Mudra banking, which empowers 70% loans being given to women, or whether it is the Jan Dhan scheme, pension schemes, insurance schemes, Ujjwala, that has reached out to every single woman who wants to have a gas stove. All this is not tokenism. And when you have She Inspires Us as a campaign where you have the opportunity to express yourself and to a country as large and diverse as India, you're bound to have contrarian opinions. So I respect Anna's opinion, but I clearly believe that ours is a forum where if women want their piece heard, this is the opportunity to speak. And that is exactly what we were working towards under the Prime Minister's novel, inspiring, invigorating, aspirational idea of March 8th being She Inspires Us.
I want to bring in Mihira Sood here because I think, I think you would all agree that on every metric, big picture, women are lagging behind in India. Education, jobs, forced marriage, physical safety of women, and so on, right? But the main question here is that under this government, under Modi, Mihira, do you believe that things are moving in the right direction? That this government is actually beginning to empower women?
I think a little bit of context here is important. To start with, I don't think it is fair to look at the status of women and compare it in the last 6 years of Mr. Modi's prime ministership. These are social problems that go back hundreds of years. And it's not something that Mr. Modi or anybody else can fix in 6 years, to be very fair. However, having said that, I'm not very satisfied with the progress that Mr. Modi's government has made on this front. And I'm not very satisfied with the extent of efforts that have been made. I think some of the work that Ms. Shaina NC highlighted just now has been very good. I think the Ujjwala scheme, for example, and some of the financial schemes and the cleanliness campaign, I think all of these have extremely positive impacts on the day-to-day lives of a lot of women. However, I do not think that the government has gone far enough in addressing problems of patriarchy, in addressing the inferior status of women. For example, it is one thing to say that you have created a scheme where women are using cleaner gas to cook. That's wonderful, but we should also be working towards eradicating these traditional gendered roles where only women of the house are doing the cooking, right? It needs to go that step further. And I don't think that Mr. Modi's government has shown that level of progressivism and imagination in its policy making. There's some day-to-day improvement, but I don't think it's really addressing the roots of patriarchy.
So, Anna, are we putting all of our expectations on the state when this is something that runs much deeper?
No, of course, Mihira is absolutely right in the sense that I'm not going to blame the Indian patriarchal social setup on Narendra Modi. He has been in power only for 6 years, and I'm not expecting a magic wand from him at all. I am simply addressing very specific schemes that the government has introduced and the actions on the ground that one sees from Mr. Modi that encourages this patriarchy and encourages misogyny. I'm glad Shaina respects my point of view, because when she said the selfie with daughter campaign was a success, I would like to ask, how can a social media campaign be a success if it is supposed to be for women? But women who object to it are threatened with rape and murder by followers of Mr. Modi, and Mr. Modi does not even chide them. And as far as some of the schemes that both Shaina and Mihira mentioned, yes, there are interesting proposals. The Pradhan Mantri, for instance, the Ujjwala Yojana, where his goal is to provide LPG cylinders, gas cylinders to women in poorer families so that they're not cooking with firewood, for instance, which is good. It's better for their health to be cooking with gas. It sounds great. And on the surface, we are being told that it has been a huge success. But the government agency itself has contradicted the figures that have been produced by that have been given by the government to us. And it turns out that the government is giving a cylinder connection to these poor families. It is not, however, looking into the fact that these poor families cannot afford refills. So according to statistics that I was reading, in fact, in the independent media, about 1/5 of the families that are provided these cylinders then don't further refill them, which means the cylinder is just lying in the house unused, and women are returning to traditional forms of cooking. And even, the sanitation scheme that Shaina spoke of, again, a great scheme. We do want all citizens of this country, not just women, but men too, to be using toilets. But Mr. Modi claims that India is almost 100%, rural India has almost 100% access to toilets, which is absolutely untrue. That is obviously a fake figure. Don't believe me, believe the National Sample Survey Organization, which is an agency that has said that in the period that the government said there was 90+% access to toilets, in fact, there was only 70%. And don't even believe the NSSO. Come to India, visit us. You go to rural areas, wander around even urban areas, you will see open defecation. So, there are schemes that sound great. But on the ground, because the government is inflating figures or giving us false figures, it is impossible to trust whether the government is actually implementing these schemes.
Okay, so I just want to grab a few of these things that you've mentioned, and we'll go one at a time, right? I want to bring up, Shaina, the issue of the online trolling and the abuse and so on, right? So in my small little anecdotal corner of the world, I've seen a little bit of it because I've been tagged in a lot of the abuse that's been directed towards Rana Ayub because she's been on the show, or women who are supportive of the Shaheen Bagh sittings, for example. So naturally, you get a lot of hyper-nationalism that comes with it, a lot of support for the government, a lot of support for Narendra Modi, a lot of hate, a lot of abuse, online abuse of a sexual nature, and so on and so forth. What Anna's saying in one of her criticisms is that sort of stuff seems to be encouraged by this government and not clamped down on. Is that fair?
So 2-3 answers. First, when Anna talks about the Ujjwala scheme, let's get on record that 6.5 crore homes have got gas cylinders. Women who used to die of respiratory problems are not just surviving through Ujjwala, but are absolutely enthused by the fact that the Prime Minister has considered giving these gas cylinders. And this has been so many people like you and me who have given up, not you as in you, but me and others in India who have given up our subsidy. So it's a great step in the right direction. You can have a contrarian opinion, well, welcome to do so. Even if 70% of India is defecation free and has toilets, that is a huge, huge jump vis-a-vis previous governments, which had not even reached a dismal 6 to 10% increase in sanitation toilets. That is at its base. Now, coming to the trolls and the opinion that you have. Yes, we will question Shaheen Bagh. If there are certain people who are playing vote bank politics to divide India without even understanding what CAA stands for, if no Indian citizen, irrespective of being Hindu, Muslim, Sikh or Jain, are believing that they are being targeted by a vicious campaign of Prime Minister Modi, then it is our prerogative too. If you have a narrative, we have a counter narrative,
okay,
but we can express the viewpoint.
But have you seen? But have you seen the trolls?
Trolled on social media.
Yeah, have you seen the tweets?
I have.
Have you read them?
I have.
Because you're talking about it in a sort of collective we. So I'm just trying to.
No, but
I'm just trying to see whether you're associating with them.
You are trying to insinuate. You are trying to insinuate that this is Prime Minister Modi replying to trolls to the tweet. He is not. There are hardcore supporters, as there are hardcore detractors. Now, if the supporters come out in full force and say what they choose to, social media is a free and fair forum. You can't hold Prime Minister Modi responsible for it. You cannot hold him responsible for opinions which are below the belt, or for language which is below the belt. And likewise, you can't hold him accountable for those who are detractors too. So I think that on a forum which is free and fair, where you have to have an opinion which comes with its own kind of agenda. We need to understand that this is the way social media is. But having said that, for a prime minister who has 53.4 million followers to say that this day is dedicated to my women of India, please come out with your stories. And when crores and crores of women come out with their stories, at least respect that and understand that this is not a gimmick. This is a communication which is at its best, where previous governments did not even choose to speak to women. Women were not even viewed as a vote bank, leave alone being respected on March 8th or any other day in a patriarchal society like ours.
Mihira Sood, is it accurate to say that you cannot hold the Prime Minister or the government for creating an atmosphere, you can't hold them accountable for creating an atmosphere where these trolls can feel empowered enough to viciously attack opponents of government's policy?
It's absolutely unacceptable to say that, because this is not just a question of Prime Minister Modi's followers. These are also, many of them, people who Prime Minister Modi himself follows and clearly then implicitly encourages. And a BJP IT cell as well is an extremely vast and well-organized machinery. We see so many instances of identical tweets that have clearly come from the BJP IT cell that are being tweeted out by the millions, absolutely identical down to every last spelling mistake. So this is not a question of some miscreant followers of Prime Minister Modi. This is very much part of the BJP's IT cell machinery, and Prime Minister Modi himself follows these people, chooses to follow them. So I really don't see how anybody can wash their hands off all of this and say that this is free and fair nature of social media. It is absolutely not. It is something that is encouraged by the government of the day.
Okay, Shaina?
Encouraged by whom? I mean, are you holding us accountable for some die-hard supporters that choose to use language which may be not in keeping with social norms? I mean, if they take law into their hands, then are you also holding us accountable for those miscreants who took law and order into their hands at Shaheen Bagh, who used below the belt commentary and said that, kill the Prime Minister, goli maar do, and then you had a counter narrative which came out. I think that we must understand, in a democracy like India, where you have such diverse opinions, such strong opinions, there will be a narrative and a counter narrative. If those who are choosing to believe that this is...
Prime Minister Modi to speak out against such abuse of women.
He has spoken out. He has spoken out on multiple occasions.
No, he has not.
That moral custodians
of
society, whether they are from the ruling party or from the opposition, all of whom must be ostracized in one voice, unequivocally. He has said this on multiple occasions.
Anna?
I don't think that you can hold him accountable for a few loudmouths or a few miscreants.
Anna, you want to come in?
Yes, I think this is very important. What China is doing is precisely what the BJP propaganda machinery does all the time. This is not about some random person that Narendra Modi is following who is abusing women. Tell me, Imran, who are the kinds of people we follow? People we follow on Twitter, right? 3 sets. One will be public figures. I follow Narendra Modi. Clearly, I don't adhere to his ideology. The other set would be people who are who we know professionally, or they are our relatives or friends. But then there's a third set that Mr. Modi is following. They're completely unknown people, or at least till 2014 when Modi came to power, they were unknown except as trolls. They were known as trolls on the social media. So why is Mr. Modi following these abusive people whose claim to fame is that they abuse women, religious minorities, and liberals from the majority community? If they are his personal friends and relatives, and he feels embarrassed to unfollow them, please let him come out and tell us so. And secondly, let him state clearly on the record that he condemns anybody who's abusing women or religious minorities, or Rana Ayub, for instance, who you mentioned over here, or Kavita Krishnan, who I mentioned, or Mihira and I, who have suffered at the hands of the BJP IT cell. Let Mr. Modi come out clearly and condemn them. But Imran, there's one other point, because again, Shaina is mixing up issues, confusing issues. I did not say that Mr. Modi should wave a magic wand and ensure that every rural household in India should have a toilet by now. I'm saying Mr. Modi set a goal, and Mr. Modi himself has stated that almost 100% of rural households in India now have access to a toilet, and according to figures of a government agency itself, this is not true. But even if you would want to ignore the government agency, come to India, walk around, and you know that the figure Mr. Modi is giving is false.
Shaina?
I don't want to respond really. The figure is real. The figure is known to one and all in the public space. If you look at documents of the government, the records which have come out by the World Bank and other international bodies also prove that Prime Minister Modi set out to achieve a Herculean task. We have succeeded at least vis-a-vis other governments, maybe 100 polls over. I'm not going to get into the lies of statistics, but I'm clearly going to say, please, as an investigative journalist, come to the ground and see what is happening in rural India. If there isn't rural electrification or rural sanitation or schemes which have been implemented and percolated down to the poorest of poor, let's not forget when Rajiv Gandhi was the Prime Minister, he himself said for every 1 rupee spent, or not even 15 paise, reaches down to the poorest of poor. And here we have made the endeavor and succeeded. Done away with middlemen, done away with corruption. All of these are huge, huge, tall claims that we should be also accepting with the sense of grace and irrespective of our ideologies. And if you can't accept that, then at least accept that there is a majoritarian opinion of the voter who has voted with a landslide faith and victory given to the Bharatiya Janata Party only because they trust the leadership of Prime Minister Modi and believe that in the days to come, we want transparency, accountability, stability, and political will, all of which has been shown by the Prime Minister through the 5-year term that he had. And that's why we got this historic mandate of 303 MPs.
I want to circle back, Mihira Sood, to something that you said earlier on, that this is not something you can fix in 6 years. It's not something that any one government can fix. This runs much deeper, right? Some statistics that are startling. In Mumbai, 860 girls are born to every 1,000 boys. Clearly, there's some gender selection going on beforehand there. Amnesty International's analysis not too long ago, looking at 370 gender specialists from 5 continents, and they analyzed the G20 nations. They found among the G20 nations, India is the worst for women. The Thomson Reuters Foundation, India is the most dangerous country in the world to be a woman because of the high risk of sexual violence and slave labor, and so on and so forth. We heard from Natalie's report as well, federal data suggesting a woman is raped on average every 15 minutes. With all of this, if the answer is not to hand over your Twitter account and your Instagram and so on to 7 women over the weekend, where do you actually start in addressing this mammoth task? Where do you begin?
So I think the change, you have to look at this change as a two-pronged approach, okay? The easiest one, which every government loves to do because it grabs the headlines, it can be vote getting, it's a talking point on the media, is of course stricter laws, stricter laws, stricter laws. But those laws are meaningless unless they are properly implemented, unless they are speedily implemented, and they still have to have the safeguards for every accused. It cannot be stricter laws with absolute dispensation of safeguards, right? But the bigger change has to come from within society, a ground-up change. It cannot be a top-down approach. It has to be a bottom-up approach. Let me take a small example. You talked about sex selection and female feticide, right? So you have a law in India that prevents prenatal diagnostic tests being done. That is, prevents ultrasounds being done that can tell you the gender. There is a heavy penalty on diagnosticians for telling the gender of an unborn child, and all of that. Now we all know that is obviously blatantly violated, and it's a well-intentioned but a very a toothless law.
Right.
That just leads to a crazy amount of paperwork for every ultrasound clinic. But how about we look at what is it that makes the girl child feel like a burden to families, right? Whether it is something like dowry expenses, whether it is the fact that marriage expenses are traditionally borne by the girl's family, whether it is the fact that girls are not seen as somebody who can go out and, have a lucrative career and therefore is a burden on the family. Those are the things you need to start changing, right? Don't create a situation where a girl child is not seen as a burden, and you will see a reduction in cases of female feticide. How do you do that? You need more women role models. You need more women in the workforce. You need affirmative action, starting with 33% reservation in parliament. Ms. Shaina NC spoke endlessly about Mr. Modi's historic mandate. Where is the 33% reservation in parliament for women that he could have brought so easily? That would be something that is far more, it would have an impact, because you need those role models, and parents need them to understand that, our daughters can also be that. They need not be a burden.
Mihira,
Mr. Modi, a few years ago,
Mr. Yeah, I'm totally out of time, Mihira. I'm sorry to cut you off. I do apologize, but we're out of time. Mihira, Anna, and Shaina, it's been great listening to all of you. I thank you very much for joining us here on The Newsmakers. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.